What are the biggest challenges contractors and distributors face in managing procurement workflows, and why is solving these inefficiencies critical in civil engineering?
Sure. So the biggest thing that we see between the distributor and the what's called the specialty trade contractor, civil contractor, right, who's out there day to day trying to manage not just their people but their materials, is the organization factor of how the data is moving on a day-to-day basis. In most companies today, material requests are flying off the shelf, right? Because a civil contractor is primarily labor.
Procurement workflows are the backbone of civil engineering projects, directly influencing budgets, timelines, and overall project success. With procurement often accounting for a significant portion of resources, an efficient process can mean the difference between a project delivering on time and within budget, or one that's plagued by costly delays and overruns. But what happens when these workflows break down? In this episode, I'm joined by Eric Helitzer, lead AP, founder and CEO of SubBase, to explore how inefficiencies in material procurement are impacting specialty contractors and distributors. He talks about some of the major challenges facing procurement, the transformative role of centralized systems and automation, and how innovative tools can streamline operations seamlessly. Whether you're an engineer, contractor, or industry leader, this discussion is full of actionable strategies to optimize your workflows and drive project success. I'm your host, James Taylor, and this is the Civil Engineering Podcast. It's now time for our Civil Engineering Conversation of the Week with Eric Helitzer. Eric, welcome to the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me on today.
Eric, let's start off by getting to know you a little bit better. Can you tell us about yourself, your career journey, and then finally, what inspired you to establish SubBase?
Sure. So I come from the background of construction. I'm a third-generation builder, grandfather and father of both in the construction management space. And I actually studied construction management at the University of Florida, went through the building construction school, and in the later days or the earlier days of my career, when I graduated, I started working for a very large specialty trade contractor in Miami. And I started my career on the subcontractor, in the ground at the subcontractor level, working for a very large concrete specialty trade contractor. Spent many years there and then went back to the family business, which was a general contracting construction management firm, where I got a deeper dive into overall general contracting, operations, pre-construction. So my career started obviously studying it in school, interned for many years in the summer before I was able to get a full-time job, and then spent 15 years by the time I graduated in just a construction management role. It wasn't until 2021, late 2021, early 2022, where the career pivoted because we were seeing a need in the market for building what is now SubBase. And it's essentially a management tool used for specialty trade contractors to digitize and enhance the way that they order materials today. Very manual process that we take under one umbrella and streamline every aspect of that workflow for them.
So it sounds like you got a lot of years of experience to kind of use that family history and that backing to kind of inspire SubBase. And it sounds like that's all based on the challenges that have taken place that you've seen over the years as a subcontractor as well as a GC. But what are the biggest challenges contractors and distributors face in managing procurement workflows, and why is solving these inefficiencies critical in civil engineering?
Sure. So the biggest thing that we see between the distributor and like what's called the specialty trade contractor, civil contractor, right, who's out there day to day trying to manage not just their people but their materials, is the organization factor of how the data is moving on a day-to-day basis. In most companies today, material requests are flying off the shelf, right? Because a civil contractor is primarily labor and material based, and a large portion of their business, I would say 80% of that, is the labor material. The material aspect is very complex. Tons of different items that are called different things. You've got many different distributors that are offering you different types of materials. Some are only good for certain jobs depending on what's been approved by the engineer. So it really depends on, a lot of different workflows that all take shape into one really key centralized moment is what we do in SubBase, is to manage all that flow. the visibility that's provided between the field, the office, and the vendor in one spot, communication, the data that's housed there, the ability for you to go back in history to see in real time without having to shuffle through emails and text messages. Those are some of the biggest problems we solve for that most people, if they're really not in it day to day, don't understand the complexities of managing those types of civil materials.
When did you first realize, like, oh my gosh, this is something that is a big issue. No one's addressing this. We need to get involved in this. Like, where was that moment that you were just like, oh, we gotta do something about
So
this?
there were two moments. The first moment that brought me into the workflow piece, right, of just digitizing a workflow in construction, was when we started to adopt it at the company I worked with. We were one of the early adopters of a platform called Procore. And Procore opened the minds of a general contractor to show that you can digitize a very manual process of managing requests for information, RFIs, submittals, and digitizing paper drawings, right? That was the first thing I saw was we can actually digitize this. We didn't have to print out all the different submittals, drive it to an architect or civil engineer to get his stamped approval on this, precast pipe, right? We can actually do it in a digitized way that allows me to manage more projects, allow me to do more high-level tasks and not just data entering into an Excel spreadsheet to track. And that kicked off the ability for us to then go deeper. And what we realized was, as we were using systems like Procore, we realized that there wasn't a good enough application for subcontractors in the field, in the office, that are managing these material workflows that are very, very manual as far as tracking all their different items. Let's call it delivery tickets, right? Getting a delivery ticket into an office today for a civil contractor is most likely coming from the field on a weekly basis, stacks of paper in a folder that then have to be reorganized to match to potentially an order, a PO, right?
And good luck making sure that you have it on the right day, right job, whatever that might be.
It's not happening is the problem. And so I was operating in the field with many different subcontractors, civil contractors, Shell, MEP, you name it. And the one thing that caught my eye was some of these companies, these civil contractors too, are large. These are not small companies. They're managing millions of dollars of materials a year. And the way that the requests were coming out of the field was written on a cardboard box that would then be text message into someone in the office that had to make the purchase. And then what happened was the person in the office was trying to interpret not just the handwriting, but what is this called, right? What is DIP, right? Ductile iron pipe. Like, they don't know that terminology. And so what we started to do is think about how can we first streamline that workflow, which is what we started with. We didn't start building for the accounting teams first to get that into their accounting system. We started building the interaction between the field to the office and then office to the vendor or field to vendor. And so that's where we started. But it was interesting to see, how orders were moving in the field. And I was seeing it all day as a project manager, and I was seeing the struggles of a phone call, right? From the civil contractors, any other contractor there, calling someone in the office, where is this? The vendor saying, oh, I don't know, I got to check. And the phone call back and forth was just rampant. It was all day, every day. And so that's where we started to lean in a little bit deeper and use our expertise to build something special.
So with that, I'm guessing, with lead times and everything else, there's certain benefits to obviously having all of this in one spot, because you're kind of seeing it all and able to project out of, okay, here's what I need. This vendor has this time frame, kind of getting that on. Is there efficiency? Is it in this process of making sure it's all streamlined?
Yeah. So the efficiency gain that we're seeing is exactly what you mentioned. It was more proactiveness, right? Being able to efficiently aggregate all the requests that are coming in from the field into one spot, so that certain things that you're going to buy from one vendor can be merged, so that you can actually take advantage of buying and tracking along a single workflow, right? Tracking, not just going through emails and text messages, but seeing everything populate on a log in real time, so that your field can be connected to see where these are in the place. Oh, these items I'm waiting for pricing on. Hey, let me go follow up my vendor real quick with the click of a button to just ping him to remind him, hey, I need this pricing. Oh, wait, this order was placed, right? But it wasn't confirmed yet. Well, it wasn't confirmed because your vendor may have had something on back order. And seeing that visibility in real time allows two things. It allows the office, right, to actually be proactive in helping the field get the materials to the job site. What I saw in the field was that most civil superintendents, they're busy, they're in the ground. And when you're in the ground, there's a lot of unforeseen. That's the one thing about civil work that I actually enjoyed, was like, oh my God, what are you going to find next? And they don't have time to worry about when is this material coming? Did it get ordered? All they're worried about right now is making sure that A, they can meet the schedule, and B, that they can actually put that pipe in the ground, the right place where it needs to go, because all of the stuff that they deal with, they shouldn't have to deal with managing the manual workflows of their materials. And so we allow companies to be a lot more proactive in that nature of not even just getting the request in on time, but tracking it throughout a workflow that automates in real time and speaks to the way that a civil contractor would order his materials.
And realistically, this centralized hub is essential for streamlining those procurement operations.
Yeah, look, the hub of what we're trying to centralize in a workflow that is very disparate and fragmented is what gives you that ability to make better decisions. Look historically, like on not just your pricing, but where did we have issues, right? You can filter a bill of materials to see how many times this item was back ordered, giving you the ability to see a lot more when you have things into one screen versus trying to find things in emails, spreadsheets, text messages, and Teams apps.
Do you have any specific examples? I know you gave some stuff of, hey, this is what triggered me into thinking about this, but share some examples of how enhancing material procurement efficiency contributed to streamlining one of your projects in particular.
Yeah. So when we were building, at least on when I was involved in the GC side, it was a lot of mixed use commercial, and a lot of the mixed use commercial, and specifically on as an example, on the concrete side, deals with a lot of consumables, and more so than on the civil side, where it's a lot larger as far as like the commodity piping. There's still consumables, but civil, a lot more commodity as far as the big, precast pipe, big ductile iron pipe. On the consumable side, right? If you are not able to have the right amount of snap ties on your job for a pour on Monday, it doesn't matter how many superintendents, how many foremen you have out there. You're not getting the inspection because you're not closing up the form. And not getting the inspection means that you have to push that pour, right? So that's where we actually started, was figuring out the consumable aspect, because the consumables no one thinks about, because it's just, I'm going to make a phone call and get here. And those are the ones that get lost in transition. The big ductile iron pipe that is weeks away, that's coming on truckloads, like, when that's coming. You don't really know when some of the smaller stuff coming, which is what gets overlooked. So that was one of the things we noticed, was how can we help very fast improve in a quick win to show superintendents in the field or anyone in the field that, hey, digitizing this in a workflow that you can see in real time may help you actually not just forecast, be more proactive on the smaller items that add up to a bigger problem.
So how do you see technology transforming procurement operations in civil engineering projects?
Well, we already see it right now. And what we see is higher level activities that are being done, meaning reducing the manual entry of a lot of basic tasks that are just not needed anymore when it comes to material procurement. And a great example is, if I'm a civil contractor, when I'm ordering my materials, I'm not going on to an Amazon where I have to search and find things that I think I want, right? I know what I want. I know the vendor I'm going to buy it to. I know the terminology too that I call it. And I want to just be able to find it real fast, click a button of this is it, and then be able to translate that to my vendor to tell him what I need. And so the first thing we're doing is, obviously, we use a lot of different artificial intelligence, and we're building on top of, the databases that are inside of SubBase to give contractors a much more frictionless experience when it comes to just getting their materials. Most contractors that are not using a system like SubBase are either making a phone call, right? Phone call is great when you can, make a phone call, your distributor picks up, right? But the problem is that paper trail, that documentation has to go somewhere. It has to eventually be documented, put into a system, and then when the bill comes, the accounting teams, to get it into your budget, have to do something with that. So we take a proactive stance to make it easy and frictionless for you to have your materials in a database where you can start searching by whatever terminology you need, populate it fast, and reduce the amount of steps it takes to get that order to your vendor. That is the biggest thing we see, is making a frictionless experience without changing the way you call things, without changing the way you've been doing it, but letting artificial intelligence, to an extent, be able to help you manage that process.
And that was exactly what I was just going to ask, was like, how does AI play into that? And it sounded like there was some of that in there, but obviously the trends in technology as we go is AI is kind of being that powerful tool. So what AI are you seeing in this technology, or just in general related to procurement operations that's helping?
So it's helping in different ways. So for the field, right, what we talked about was a couple couple things around databases. So the biggest thing that we're working on that is working that we're doing today is, hey, if a superintendent in the field calls his ductile iron pipe, right, 12-inch ductile iron pipe, right, he just wants to call it that. He knows what it is, and he sends it to his vendor either for pricing or for an order. The vendor, right, is called that is not called 12-inch DIP in his system. It is a long SKU. It's nomenclature that is for him, for them. But we also don't want to change the way that a superintendent, a foreman, or someone in the field is calling that item. So how do you bridge the two together? And that's what we're building is artificial intelligence is learning how to do that, and we're structuring it in a way so that the field doesn't have to change the way that they're doing their business. The vendor doesn't have to change the way that they're doing it, but streamline the process so that both parties can communicate in that same form. So that's like the biggest piece on the field side, along with, being able to have what we believe is the appropriate term, like a conversational assistant, where instead of me having to type what I need, right, I want to be able to pick up my phone because I'm used to getting on my phone or getting on a radio, speaking into that and having the ability for the platform to dictate what I need and documenting that without me having to do any entry. That's what we're working on as far as AI for the field. On the accounting side, right, the biggest problem is the invoice reconciliation and the workflows that are tied to that. Taking an invoice, matching it to a PO that you believe is correct, right? You don't have the time to sit there and match it all, nor do you have the time to line item match. So that's what we're doing on that workflow piece as far as invoice reconciliation, moving that back into an accounting system once that's been approved.
Yeah, that's all pretty cool things of how mapping and everything else and the AI trends that are out there. Besides AI, and what other trends or advancements in material procurement technology do you believe is going to shape the future of the civil engineering industry?
So I think that generally, right, like AI, obviously we can talk about AI forever, but some of the other trends that we're seeing is more related to just digitize, like building a very, very clean interface, because a lot of the technology that was built over the last 20 years in construction, it's very old school, and it's very hard, right, for user adoption when you have these old, antiquated, clunky systems, right? So what we're doing is we're looking at the way that our product is being used today, and we're enhancing the interface and the experience, because what we've seen is that in order to get adoption, right, you can have a phenomenal product and a phenomenal problem you're solving for, but the adoption is key. And so really digging deep into the interface of how things should be presented to someone is different, right? Each trade is going to have a different interface for somewhat of how to order materials. Ordering ready-mix concrete is different than ordering that ductile iron pipe from Ferguson or someone else, right? So how do you play against the two with technology? And that's not artificial intelligence. That's having people that understand the workflows of construction, but can really think outside the box to make a very user-friendly platform. And so that's one of like the biggest cruxes, is making it super simple and easier so that you can get that seamless adoption.
So here's a question for you. So, civil engineering spans design, construction, the whole gambit. And we've talked a lot about the construction aspect of things, but what can civil engineers that are designers do to make sure that they're setting up their designs for success so that when it goes to construction, it makes that procurement process easier?
I honestly think that one of the biggest things that I saw when I was in the industry was a lot of the times the civil engineer would come in early, right? And sometimes even contracted with the owner, because the owner is typically using a civil engineer to do work even before they start going vertical. One of the biggest things that I saw that was missing was bringing in, right, a true civil contractor early on in the onset, not just to use the data on old projects of, hey, these are the materials I bought and it's the price, but to really dive deep into the design aspect of it, and to spend the money up front to do a lot more, what I would call it, like geotechnical engineering, as far as bores, and really, really not going out to a site and doing 3 bores in a corner and calling it a day. We experienced that on multiple jobs where we had issues because there was not enough diligence done up front. And the biggest risk I saw out there was underground, because it's unforeseen, right? A lot of what's happening in civil construction, which we experienced just from experience building, was you don't know what you're going to get until you dig, because the boring samples out there are, I know it's expensive, but there's not enough, and you're not going to know what is underground. And the ground can change from 10 feet on one side, 10 feet to another. And that was the biggest risk we saw was, what are you going to get underground? And that's what I would do, is bring and the civil engineering team and that civil contractor, even if it's not someone you're going to use, up front, be involved in the design. And the owners need to spend more money up front on the geotechnical side.
It's really looking at that constructability aspect of things of, my design works on paper.
Exactly.
But when you actually get out in the field, do you have enough of that information, that geotech that you're mentioning? Is there ground penetrating radar? Do you understand all the existing utilities that might be there? All those pieces play a factor to make sure that you're setting your project up for success for construction. So you're not having those delays, like you're saying, in procurement of, hey, I found this, now I got to make another connection, or now I got to avoid this. How do I get that part or that piece that needs to be
I can talk about this all day. So a lot of the issues that we saw too when we were building in general was, a lot of times, like, owners want to go, and what they don't want to spend on, right, is underground, right? No one's going to see that. So one of the biggest problems was that, back to the borings, if you don't do a good enough job of diligence on that site, and I know most owners don't want to spend the money, it is 10 times more costly to stop that job when you got the shell contractor out there who's delaying your critical path. You've got the civil contractor who's ready to pull off the job site, because now you have to redesign, right, issues that could have been designed up front. And so that was the biggest problem I saw, was how do you proactively get in front of the civil aspects of the job? Because you have no idea what you're getting into unless you really do a good, thorough job boring, and or you start digging and do some real work up front before you go vertical on any type of construction project.
So in addition to that, how can civil engineers ensure that their procurement processes remain adaptable to evolving project needs and technologies?
Honestly, the biggest thing is to get outside the office, get on the job sites, listen to the subcontractors, be in the meetings with the subs and GCs, even though if a GC may not want you there, be proactive on the job site. Like the one thing that I learned was the field education happens in the field. Civil engineers are phenomenal at what they do. We've worked with some really, really amazing civil engineers. It's a very difficult job. I think that it's one thing to be able to design on paper. The next is to be able to problem solve with your subcontractors and the GC in the field. There's things that you're just never going to learn unless you're out there proactively asking the questions. And I think that that's the biggest thing, because you're going to see the technology out there. You're going to see what the subs are using. You can see what the GCs are using. And I always thought that when a civil engineer took the time to come out on site, it showed a lot of respect for the guys that are actually building out there.
Yeah, I know for myself, that was kind of the piece where I elevated my career, was when I went out and I was kind of thrown into a project. I wasn't a part of the design, got thrown in during construction, to work with the construction manager, kind of figure out some of the things, work with the subcontractors. But seeing that in the field, even though I didn't do the design, I started understanding a little bit more about the different aspects as a young engineer, and really was allowed to kind of put that into practice moving forward so that it could be beneficial. So I really like that thought there of, hey, if you're a young engineer, get out in the field. Don't just sit at your desk and look at the computer screen. Like, go see your work in progress and see what the different aspects are, so that you can really get a good picture and continue to elevate your designs moving forward.
Yeah. And also, not just that, one thing I'll add is continue to ask the questions, right? It is okay to ask questions. And it's also okay for the subcontractor, in my opinion, to actually ask questions and push back to make sure that their experience of what they're doing in the field actually can jive with what the civil engineer looks to be designing and drawing on paper.
Eric, what final piece of advice can you give to civil engineers and construction professionals who want to leverage technology to optimize their workflows and stay competitive?
The one advice I would say is don't be afraid of change. I think the biggest thing that we see in the industry is, a lot of people don't want change, but they also need to embrace, a newer generation that is going to start adopting technology. And so it really starts at the top, right? You have that cultural buy-in from the top, especially in a civil engineering firm. Civil engineers have been using CAD longer than most people, right? They have adapted technologies. There's ground penetrating radar. Like, there's phenomenal technologies out there for the civil engineers. The one advice I would give is, from a cultural perspective at the top, embrace the change, right? And don't be afraid to really adopt things that, that is going on in the industry, because I think that the status quo, right, is going to change. And I think that to attract that younger talent coming in, right? You have to show them where the industry is going, and I think that'll be a big part of how to attract the younger talent.
That's a great point there at the end of just like the talent, right? That's a thing that we're seeing across the board right now is there's not enough people to do the work that's need to get done. And if you're able to leverage that technology, that's going to interest that talent even more. And yeah, there's definitely some great ways of doing that with your procurement processes and optimizing your workflows. So Eric, I appreciate the conversation. Great stuff that you had today, and really interested in continuing to see more from you and as we go forward.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
All right, welcome back. It's time now for our CE Hot Seat segment of the week with Eric Helitzer. Eric, are you ready to go?
Yes.
All right. Do you have any specific rituals that you practice every day? For example, do you have a specific morning ritual, lunchtime ritual, things you do on a daily basis that contribute to you being a successful professional?
Yeah, I have two. Morning ritual is I always in the morning, I have 3 kids. I'm the one responsible for getting their backpacks packed and their waters put in their backpack every day, all day. That is like a known thing. If I don't do it, I can't leave for my office to work. The second thing, for lunch, we always encourage eating with the team. Whenever the team's here, we always go and eat together.
What is one book that you recommend to engineers regularly, or just one book that you have found to be extremely helpful in your professional or personal development?
So not related to civil engineering, but personal development and really part of my learnings was it's a book called The Mom Test, and I was told to read it. And the reason why the Mom Test is important is because it digs deeper into problems. And what it does is it actually allows you to validate that the decisions you're making are true based on the questions you're asking and not trying to convince somebody that you're right. So it's called The Mom Test, and it's a really phenomenal short book, really very short read.
Awesome. Thinking back on your managers of the past, picture your favorite manager or managers. What made them your favorite?
So they were very organized, like super, super organized. And the one manager I'm thinking about allowed me to take risk, which is why I'm here today. And so they always encouraged risk as far as taking risks to really grow the company.
I've got one final question, and that's the critical civil engineering career elevator advice question. If you got into an elevator with a civil engineering student and had about 30 to 40 seconds with them, what career advice would you share with them?
I would share 2 things of career advice. 1, get into the field as much as you can. That is the best education you're ever going to get. And 2, I would suggest that if someone getting into that position of civil engineer, don't just talk to the civil contractor. Make sure that you're including the shell contractor and all the different trades in your designs, because your design up front is not just going to affect the civil contractor. It affects all the other trades upstream and downstream.
Eric, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can our listeners connect with you?
You can connect on our website. It's just SubBase, SUBBASE.io. And we're also very active on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Please remember you can find the show notes for this episode at civilengineeringpodcast.com. There you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during the episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your civil engineering endeavors.